Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you are standing on a massive timeline of history.
Right.
To your left, you have one of the world's first great urban civilizations, the Indus Valley. We're talking about those brick cities, the organized drainage systems, the seals with the unicorns on them. It's orderly, it's urban, it's impressive.
A truly remarkable, organized society, and then it just sort of fizzles out.
Exactly. It collapses, silence falls over the cities, the urban centers dissolve, people disperse. It's a systemic collapse.
It is a huge question mark in history.
Now look to your right on this timeline. Fast forward about 1,000 years, and you see the rise of the second big urbanization in the Gangetic Plain. Huge empires, iron cities, organized states.
A completely different world in a different place.
But in between, in that gap, roughly from 1500 BC to 600 BC, history books usually slap a pretty depressing label on it. They call it a dark age.
Which is, a classic misnomer. It is the historian's way of saying we don't have enough buildings from this period.
Or we don't have writing we can read on stone tablets.
Yeah. Precisely. But when you actually look at the evidence, the texts, the cultural shifts, it wasn't dark at all. It was formative.
That is exactly what we are digging into today, because this so-called Dark Age was actually blazing with fire worship, the clash of chariots, and eventually the sparks of some of the most profound philosophy the human race has ever produced. We are talking about the Vedic Age.
And this isn't just a niche history lesson. If you want to understand the operating system of the Indian subcontinent, the language, the social structures, the philosophy that underpins millions of lives today, this is where the code was written.
It's the incubation period.
That's the perfect term for it.
And the mission for this deep dive is to track a really specific, almost cinematic arc. We're going to watch a society transform from what I can only describe as nomadic cowboys living in the wild west of the Indus.
A great way to put it.
Into a settled, iron-wielding imperial civilization that produced metaphysical ideas comparable to quantum physics.
From cowboys to philosophers, it's a journey of migration, technology, and thought itself.
So let's look at our sources, because usually when we talk about ancient history, we are looking at pottery shards or ruined walls. But here, we have something different.
We have a library that was memorized before it was ever written down. We have the Vedic texts themselves, the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Veda. These are some of the oldest composed texts in any Indo-European language.
So we're dealing with literature first and foremost.
Yes, but we're also looking at archaeology, specifically the painted grayware culture. We can see their pots, their settlements.
PGW culture, right.
And this is the part that usually surprises people. Inscriptions found nowhere near India. We're looking at evidence from Turkey and Syria.
That part blew my mind during the prep. We were finding clues about Vedic history in the Middle East. It sounds impossible.
It's true. It's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Okay, we will absolutely get to that. But first, we have to address the elephant, or maybe the horse in the room. Who were these people? We call them the Aryans. But man, does that word have baggage.
It has an immense amount of baggage. It has been weaponized, politicized, and, completely distorted for the last 200 years.
So for the purpose of this deep dive, we need to strip all that away.
We have to. We need to look at it clinically. In a scholarly context, Indo-Aryan is strictly a linguistic term.
Okay, that's a critical distinction. So when you say Indo-Aryan, you aren't talking about a biological race. You aren't talking about eye color or skull shape.
Precisely. It refers to a subgroup of speakers who belong to the Indo-Iranian branch of the wider Indo-European language family. It's about the software running in their brains, their language, not their physical hardware.
And the word itself, Arya, what did it mean to them?
Well, it appears in the texts as a self-designation. Etymologically, it comes from the root ar, which implies to cultivate or to furrow.
Like tilling the land.
Possibly, but it came to mean something like kinsman, companion, or noble. It was a cultural badge. If you spoke the language, if you followed the rituals, you were Arya. If you didn't, you were Dasyu or Dasa, the other.
Okay, so we had this group, the Aryans. The big question, the one that starts fights at academic conferences, is where do they come from? Because it feels like there are 5 different theories and everyone is shouting.
It is the great debate, and it's so contentious. Let's break it down like a detective story because the clues are fascinating.
Okay, where do we start?
First, you have the European theory. This goes back to the 18th century and Sir William Jones. He was British judge in India, starts learning Sanskrit for his job, and has a massive wait a minute moment.
He notices the words were the same. Were very similar.
Uncannily similar. He noticed that Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin were cousins. The classic example is mother. In Sanskrit, it's matra. In Latin, mater. In Greek, meter.
Even English mother, it's right there.
It's undeniable. Or the word for father, pitar in Sanskrit, pater in Latin. Or the word for is asti in Sanskrit, esti in Greek, est in Latin.
That is way too close to be a coincidence.
Exactly. So his theory was that these languages all split from a common ancestor, a Proto-Indo-European language, likely spoken on the steppes of Eastern Europe or Central Asia.
And then you have the Central Asian theory, which is a refinement of that, right? Famously championed by Max Muller.
It is. This one gets really interesting because it zeroes in on the connection between the Indian Vedas and the ancient Iranian text, the Zend-Avesta.
The prep notes mentioned this H&S switch. It sounds like a secret code. Can you explain that?
It's a consistent phonetic shift. It's one of the coolest bits of linguistic evidence you'll ever see. In the Vedas, the sacred intoxicating drink is called soma.
Okay.
In the Iranian Avesta, the sacred drink is called hahoma. The S consistently becomes an H.
Wow.
It doesn't stop there. In the Vedas, the word for a divinity, which later becomes a demon, is Asura. In the Avesta, the supreme god is Ahura Mazda.
So Asura becomes Ahura.
The Sapta Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers in the Vedas, corresponds to the Hapta Hindu in the Avesta.
So this suggests that the people who wrote the Vedas and the people who wrote the Avesta were basically the same people, or at least very closely related, living together for a long time before they split up.
Correct. It points to a shared home somewhere in Central Asia before one group went southeast to India and the other went southwest to Iran.
That feels pretty compelling.
It's the most widely accepted theory in mainstream academia, but we can't ignore the outliers. Have you heard of the Arctic theory?
Bal Gangadhar Tilak, right, the Indian freedom fighter. I thought that was a metaphor or something.
No, he was deadly serious, and he was a brilliant scholar and mathematician. He wasn't just guessing. He analyzed the astronomical references in the Rig Veda.
And what did he find?
He found descriptions of dawns that lasted for days and nights that lasted for 6 months.
Which functionally only happens if you are near the North Pole.
Exactly. Or the South Pole, but the context points north. He argued that the oldest memories preserved in the Vedas describe an Arctic homeland maybe before the last ice age forced them south.
That's a wild idea.
It's a controversial theory for sure, but the astronomical data he cites is very, very puzzling to explain otherwise. It's hard to just dismiss it.
And then, of course, there is the Indian theory, the argument that they didn't come from anywhere. They were here all along.
This is a view championed by some Indian scholars like Dr. Sam Purnanand and A.C. Duss. They argue that the Sapta Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers in the Punjab region, was the original homeland.
And what's their main argument?
It's primarily linguistic depth. They say Sanskrit has such a vast, complex vocabulary of original terms for local flora and fauna that it looks like the source, not a derivative.
The idea being if you migrated, your language would have loan words or memories of other places.
Precisely. And they point out that the geography in the Rig Veda is purely Indian. There are no clear memories of icy mountains or Central Asian steppes. There are no tigers in the Arctic, but there are plenty in India.
So it's a fierce debate. Migration versus indigenous development.
A very fierce debate, often with political overtones.
But you mentioned a smoking gun earlier. We have to go back to Turkey and Syria. Because if I'm an ancient Indian god, what am I doing in a treaty in the Middle East?
This is the Bogaskoy inscription, dating back to 1400 BC. It was found at Hattusa, the capital of the ancient Hittite Empire in modern-day Turkey.
Okay.
It records a peace treaty between the Hittites and a neighboring people, the Mitanni. Now, when you sign a treaty in the ancient world, you call on gods to witness it, to curse you if you break it.
Standard procedure. May lightning strike me if I lie.
Exactly. And the Mitanni king lists his gods. He calls upon Indra, he calls upon Varuna, he calls upon Mitra, and he calls upon the Nasatyas.
Wait, those are all Vedic gods. Indra is the king of the gods in the Rig Veda. The Nasatyas are the Ashvins, the twin horsemen.
They are unambiguously Vedic deities.
That is wild. 1400 BC. That is roughly the same time as the early Vedas are being compiled. And you have kings in Syria swearing by Indra.
It tells us that this culture, or at least its ruling elite, was mobile. The Indo-Aryan speakers were present in West Asia.
So what's the implication? Does that mean they moved from India to Syria?
That's one interpretation. The other, more common one, is that it represents a third branch of the Indo-Aryan migration from Central Asia. One group went to India, one to Iran, and a third went west to Mesopotamia.
But either way, it proves that the Vedic world wasn't isolated. It was part of a massive Bronze Age network of movement and cultural exchange.
Absolutely. It shatters any idea of a civilization developing in a vacuum.
So we have this mobile group of people. Let's zoom in on the ones who established themselves in the Indian subcontinent. We call this the Early Vedic period, roughly 1500 to 1000 BC. What did their map look like?
Their universe was the Sapta Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers. This covers present-day eastern Afghanistan, Punjab, and both Pakistan and India, and parts of Haryana.
And which river was the most important?
The text mentions the Indus, the Sindhu, more than any other river. It was their economic highway, their lifeline.
But the notes say the most holy river wasn't the Indus.
No. The most revered, the one described with the most passion, the one they call best of mothers, best of rivers, best of goddesses, was the Saraswati.
Which is fascinating because if you look at a map today, you won't find a massive river called Saraswati flowing to the sea.
It is the lost river. It's a huge geological mystery. The Rig Veda describes it as a mighty stream, breaking down the mountain ranges like a miner, flowing from the mountains to the sea.
But it's gone.
It's gone. Today, we believe it dried up due to tectonic shifts and climatic changes, likely becoming the seasonal Gagar-Hakra riverbed that flows through the Thar Desert. But for them, it was the center of their spiritual world.
Okay, so they are living by these rivers, but they aren't building big cities like the Indus Valley people did. Let's talk about their lifestyle. I called them cowboys earlier. Was I exaggerating?
Honestly, no, you nailed it.
Yeah.
The academic term is pastoral, but cowboy economy is essentially what it was. They were semi-nomadic, they lived in temporary villages, and their entire worldview, their wealth, their status revolved around one animal.
The cow.
The cow.
I want to spend a moment on the language here because this is where it gets really funny and insightful. I was reading through the vocabulary list in the research, and it seems like they couldn't invent a word for anything without referencing a cow.
It's true. It permeates the language. Today, you and I might measure wealth in stocks or real estate or Bitcoin. They measured it in heads of cattle.
So if I'm a rich guy in the Rig Veda, what am I called?
You are Gomat, which simply translates to one who possesses cows.
And the king, the chief, the Rajan.
He wasn't called Lord of the Earth or Conqueror of the World. He was Gopati,
Which means,
protector of cows.
and if the king decides to go to war,
The most common word for war was Gavisti,
don't tell me.
the search for cows.
That is amazing. Gentlemen, grab your bows. We are going searching for cows.
It implies that early warfare wasn't about conquering territory on a map. It was about raiding. You raided the neighboring tribe to steal their herd. That was how you expanded your economy.
It really is the Wild West. Cattle rustling is foreign policy.
It is, and it goes even deeper, even the way they told time. The word for dusk or evening was Godhuli.
Cow dust.
Yes. The time of day when the herds are coming home from the pasture and kicking up dust against the sunset. It's such a beautiful sensory image.
It really is. What about family relationships?
The word for daughter was duhitri. It means the one who milks. It shows that the daughter had a crucial economic role in the household. She managed the dairy production, a key part of their wealth.
And the guest. This one surprised me.
Gona. This one is a bit grim. It means cow killer, or one for whom a cow is killed.
Wow. So if I'm your guest, you kill a cow for me.
It means that the guest is so honored, so important, that you are willing to slaughter a valuable asset, a cow or a bull, to feed them. It shows that hospitality was a high-stakes economic sacrifice. This wasn't just, offering a cup of tea.
So we have this society where cows are money, security, and even time itself. But how is it governed? You mentioned the Rajan, the king. Was he an absolute dictator? Could he just chop off heads if he wanted to?
Far from it. And this is a nuance that often gets lost. The early Vedic polity was tribal, but it was participatory. The king's power was checked. He was a war leader, essentially a hired gun for the tribe, the Jana.
A hired gun.
In a sense.
Yeah.
He was elected by the tribe to lead them in battle and protect the cattle, but he had to answer to assemblies.
Tell us about these assemblies. This sounds almost democratic.
In a way, it was. You had the Sabha, which was the assembly of elders and elites, the experienced warriors and priests. Think of it like a council of elders.
Okay.
Then you had the Samiti, which was the general assembly of the people. The whole tribe, or at least all the free men, would gather there to discuss important matters. The king had to attend and listen.
There was a third one.
The Vedatha, this seems to be the oldest one, a kind of clan assembly.
Yeah.
It handled things like rituals, social affairs, and crucially, the distribution of loot from those cattle raids.
And the detail that surprised me, women were in the room.
Yes, this is so important. In the early Vedic period, the texts are clear that women attended the Vedatha and the Sabha. They weren't just present, they participated in the deliberations. It suggests a much more egalitarian gender dynamic than what we see later.
It sounds rough and ready, but surprisingly fair. However, we can't talk up this period without talking about the violence, because these tribes were constantly fighting.
Constantly. Gavisi was a way of life.
And there was one battle, the Battle of 10 Kings. That sounds like the season finale of a massive TV show.
The Dashrajana. It is the defining political and military conflict of the Rig Veda. If you want to understand how the political map of ancient northern India was drawn, you have to look at this battle.
Okay, set the scene for us. Where and when?
We are on the banks of the Purushni River. That's the modern-day Ravi River in Punjab. On one side, you have the Harada tribe. Their king is Sudas.
The Faratas, that name sounds very familiar.
It should. Farat, Karthavarsha. The indigenous name for India comes directly from this specific tribe. They are the titular ancestors of the nation.
So, Sudas is the king of the Haratas. Who is he fighting?
Everyone. It's a massive coalition. 10 different tribes. The hymns say there were 5 Aryan tribes and 5 non-Aryan tribes, all ganged up to destroy him. It's 10 against 1.
What sparked such a huge alliance against one guy?
It seems to have been a mix of political and spiritual rivalry. The story goes that King Sudas had dismissed his chief priest, the powerful sage Visvamitra, and appointed a new one, Vasishtha.
No, that's not going to go over well.
Not at all.
Oh.
Visvamitra was, understandably, furious. He went out and used his influence to organize this massive coalition to crush Sudas. So you have this personal rivalry between 2 powerful priests fueling an all-out war.
So it's a war of armies, but also a war of wizards, in a way.
Exactly. The hymns describe the battle vividly. The coalition tries to divert the flow of the river to drown the Bharatas. It's early hydraulic warfare. But the plan fails. Either their dam breaks or Indra intervenes, depending on how you read it. The river rushes back or becomes fordable for Sudas, and the Haratas launch a ferocious counterattack. They absolutely annihilate the coalition. The river is said to have run red with blood.
And the winner takes all.
The Haratas become the dominant power in the region. And over time, they merge with one of the most powerful tribes they defeated, the Purus, to form a new super tribe, the Kurus.
And the Kurus are the ancestors of the Pandavas and Kauravas in the Mahabharata.
You've got it. So this battle, maybe 3,500 years ago on the banks of the Ravi, basically scripted the lineage of the great Indian epics and eventually gave its name to the modern country.
That's an incredible through line from one battle.
It connects the ancient past directly to the present.
Let's pivot to the social structure inside these tribes. We touched on women in the assemblies, but generally when people hear Vedic India, they immediately think caste system. Was that there from day one?
Not in the rigid, oppressive, hereditary way we think of it today. The early Vedic society was relatively fluid. The primary unit was the kula, or family, which was patriarchal, but social roles were not set in stone.
But the outline mentions Varna. Doesn't that mean caste?
The word Varna literally means color. Initially, it seems to have been a distinction between the Aryans, who described themselves as fair, and the indigenous people, the Dasyoshidases, who were described as darker and having different customs.
So it was an us versus them identifier.
Primarily. But within the Aryan society itself, your job was not fixed by birth. Occupation was a choice.
So you weren't born a carpenter and forced to die a carpenter and your kids had to be carpenters?
No.
Yeah.
There is a famous verse in the 9th mandala of the Rig Veda where a man says, "I am a poet, my father is a physician, and my mother grinds corn on the grinding stones. We all have different occupations and desire wealth."
That's a smoking gun right there. A poet, a doctor, and a miller, all in one nuclear family.
Exactly. It's definitive proof of social mobility. The fourfold Varna system, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, only appears in one hymn, the Purusha Sukta, which is in the very last book of the Rig Veda. Most scholars agree it was a very late addition.
So it was an idea that was just starting to form at the end of this early period.
Correct. For most of the cowboy era, society was much more flexible and merit-based.
And we need to double-click on the status of women because the contrast with later periods is just heartbreaking. You said they were in the assemblies. What about education?
They had the right to Upanayana, the sacred thread ceremony. This was the formal initiation into education in ancient India. It means they studied the Vedas, just like the boys.
They weren't just allowed to study them, they wrote parts of them.
Yes, we have hymns in the Rig Veda that are explicitly attributed to women, poets, and philosophers like Apala, Viswavara, Gosa, and Lopamudra. They weren't just consumers of culture, they were creators of it.
That's incredible. And marriage.
Adult marriage was the norm. The texts suggest an age of around 16 or 17. None of the child marriage practices we see later, they seem to have had a say in choosing their partners too.
And if their husband died.
Widow remarriage, a practice known as niyoga, was permitted. And there is absolutely no evidence of sati, the practice of a widow immolating herself on her husband's pyre, or purda, the veiling of women, in this early period.
So we have this mobile, pastoral, relatively egalitarian society in the Punjab region. Yeah. But then around 1000 BC, the story changes. The great shift. We move into the later Vedic period. What happened?
The first thing that happened is that the geography changes. The center of gravity for the Aryan tribes begins to migrate eastward. They leave the Indus region and move into the Indo-Gangetic divide, the upper Ganga Valley.
Now, for the listener visualizing this, the Punjab is a land of 5 rivers. It's relatively open grassland. But the Ganga Valley in 1000 BC, that's not farm fields.
No, it is dense, terrifying jungle. It's thick, wet, monsoonal forest. It's full of tigers, elephants, massive hardwood trees with deep roots. You can't just graze your cows there.
So how do they get in? How do we make a life there?
Fire and iron. The Shatapatha Brahmana describes the fire god Agni literally eating the forest as he moves east, with the people following him. It's a mythological retelling of slash-and-burn agriculture.
But fire isn't enough for those deep roots in that heavy soil.
It isn't. You need a harder metal. And around 1000 BC, we start seeing the widespread use of iron, which they called Krishna ayas, or black metal, to distinguish it from the earlier ayas, which was copper or bronze.
So this is the Iron Age arriving in India.
It is. Copper and bronze tools were too soft for this environment. Iron axes allowed them to clear the jungle, and heavy iron-tipped plows allowed them to turn the thick, clay-rich soil of the Ganges Valley for the first time.
And this technological shift dictates a massive lifestyle shift.
Completely. Once you clear that hard-won forest and plant rice or wheat, you are stuck. You can't wander anymore. You have to stay to protect and harvest your crops. Pastoralism gives way to settled agriculture.
A sedentary lifestyle.
Yes. And because they are settled, land becomes the new wealth. It's no longer about how many cows you have, it's about how much territory you control.
And this changes the politics fundamentally. The Rajan stops being just a tribal war chief.
And becomes a king of a territory. The tribe, transforms into the Janapada, literally, the place where the tribe sets its foot. Territory becomes the basis of the state.
And I assume the kings start getting a bit more arrogant, a bit more powerful.
Oh, much more. They start calling themselves Samrat or Ekrat, sole ruler, emperor. And to justify this new centralized power, they need more than just the consent of the tribe. They need divine legitimacy. This is where the grand rituals come in.
These rituals sound incredibly theatrical, like the Ashvamedha, the horse sacrifice.
Yeah.
Explain to me how this actually worked, because it sounds like a diplomatic nightmare.
It was pure political theater, designed to project power. A king who wanted to claim emperor status would consecrate a special white horse and then release it.
Let it go.
Let it go, but not alone. For 1 year, the horse was allowed to wander wherever it wanted. But following the horse at a distance was a massive army.
Okay, I see where this is going.
If the horse walked into your territory, you, as a neighboring king, had 2 choices. You could let it pass, which meant you accepted the sponsoring king's supremacy and agreed to pay him tribute. Or you could stop the horse.
Which meant war.
Which meant you had to fight the massive army that was conveniently following it. It was a way of aggressively claiming territory without technically declaring war first. Hey, the horse went there, not me.
That is essentially a protection racket with a horse as the enforcer.
It asserted unquestioned control over a vast area. After a year, if the horse returned safely, it was sacrificed in a huge ceremony, and the king was declared an overlord.
And what about the Vajapaya? The chariot race.
This was another one. It was a ritual race where the king competed against his kinsmen. But the rituals and, well, the rules were designed to ensure the king always won.
It was rigged.
Laughs, essentially. It symbolized that while he was of the tribe, he was now supreme among them. He was no longer first among equals, he was just first.
So the king is getting more powerful. His territory is expanding. What happens to those democratic assemblies, the Sabha and Samiti?
They decline rapidly. Their power withers. The Vedatha, the old clan assembly, completely disappears from the records.
And they ought to.
The Sabha and Samiti continue, but they lose their teeth. They become dominated by chiefs and rich nobles, a kind of royal court. They're no longer assemblies of the people, and most significantly, women are kicked out.
That is the turning point.
It's a huge shift. In the later Vedic period, women can no longer attend the assemblies. Their public voice is silenced. They are pushed into the domestic sphere.
This marks the beginning of the stratification of society. The fluidity of the cowboy era is gone.
It solidifies. The Varna system hardens into a rigid four-tiered hierarchy. The Brahmanas, the priests who control the complex new rituals, and the Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers who control the land, consolidate power and privileges. They become the elite.
And below them.
The Vaishyas, the commoners, farmers, traders, become the tax base. They pay the bali, which transforms from a voluntary offering to a compulsory tax that supports the upper two classes.
And the Shudras.
They are pushed to the very margins, their role defined as serving the other three. This is also when the Gotra system emerges.
Gotra means cowpen, right? I remember that?
Yes, literally cowpen. It came to mean a lineage descending from a common male ancestor, usually a mythical sage. It established the rules of exogamy. You could not marry someone from the same Gotra.
Which creates a complex web of social rules.
Yes, it created alliances, but also severely restricted freedom of choice in marriage.
And we also see the beginning of the ashrama system, the 4 stages of life.
The idea begins to form here, yes. The student, brahmacharya, the householder, grihastha, the hermit, manaprastha, and the renunciate, sannyasa. Though in this period, it was mostly just the first 3 that were practiced. The idea of total renunciation came a bit later.
And for women, the latter Vedic period sounds like a really rough time. The decline seems steep.
It was a significant and tragic decline. We mentioned they lost access to the assemblies. But they also lost the right to Upanayana, the sacred thread ceremony.
Which cut them off from education.
It effectively cut them off from formal education and from knowledge of the Vedas. Their role was redefined as being a wife and mother, subservient to their father, then husband, then son.
The source notes mention a text, the Atreya Brahmana, which has a pretty terrible quote about daughters.
Yes, it's a famous and depressing line. It describes the daughter as a source of sorrow, while the son is the savior of the family. We see the beginnings of child marriage, and in some rare textual references, the custom of sati starts to appear.
Why? Why such a sharp decline?
The shift to a settled agricultural society is key. Land is now the primary form of wealth, and it's passed down through the male line. So ensuring the purity of that lineage and controlling women's sexuality to guarantee the legitimacy of the male heir becomes a social obsession.
A patriarchal grip tightens.
It does.
But, and this is the classic Indian paradox, even in this era of decline, we have these incredible exceptions. We have to talk about Gargi.
Gargi Vachaknavi. She is a beacon in the darkness. She appears in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, one of the great philosophical texts.
Tell the story.
King Janaka of Videha holds a great philosophical debate. The prize for the wisest sage is 1,000 cows, and each cow has 10 gold coins hanging from its horns, a massive prize.
A fortune.
And the great sage Ajnavalkya is there, and he is just destroying everyone in arguments. He is clearly the smartest man in the room. He tells his student, "Son, drive these cows home."
And then Gargi stands up.
A woman stands up in this hall full of male sages, and she challenges him. And she doesn't ask easy questions. She grills him on the very nature of reality. She asks him, if everything in this world is woven like warp and woof into water, then what is water woven into?
She's asking about the ultimate substrate of the universe.
Exactly. She pushes him layer by layer. What is the air woven into? What are the worlds of the sun woven into? The worlds of the gods. She pushes him to the very edge of metaphysics, to the ultimate reality of Brahman.
And how does he react?
He finally loses his cool. He can't answer her final question, and he shouts, "Gargi, do not ask too much or your head'll fall off."
Wow.
Yeah.
Shut up or die. That is a rude way to win a debate.
It is. It shows the threat of violence that underpinned the patriarchy. But the fact that she was there, the fact that her name was recorded and celebrated in this foundational text, it shows that the intellectual fire of the Vedic woman wasn't completely extinguished.
Just flickering.
But still burning.
Let's follow that thread of intellect,
Right.
because we promised from cowboys to philosophers. We've gone from a very practical, nature-based religion to something much deeper. In the early period, they worshipped Indra and Agni.
Right. Rig Vedic religion was, you could say, objective and nature-centric. Indra, the god of rain, thunder and war, has 250 hymns, the most of anyone. Agni, the fire god, the messenger, has 200. They were worshipping the forces of nature that affected their daily lives.
You mentioned the term henotheism.
Yes, it's a fascinating concept. It means that when you are worshipping Indra in that moment, he is the supreme god. He is everything. But when you switch to praising Agni, suddenly he is the supreme god. You treat the god of the moment as the absolute without denying the existence of the others.
It's a kind of serial monotheism.
That's a good way to describe it. But in the later Vedic period, Indra and Agni get demoted. They're still around, but they lose their superstar status.
And who takes their place?
New gods rise, or old minor ones become major. Prajapati, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Rudra, a fierce mountain god who later merges into the figure of Shiva, the destroyer. You see the beginnings of the later Hindu trinity.
But the biggest change isn't the names of the gods, it's the nature of the worship.
Yeah, exactly. The rituals, the yajnas, became incredibly complex, mechanical, and expensive. They could last for days, weeks, even years.
And it became about magic.
It did. The idea was that if you perform the ritual perfectly, if you pronounce every single syllable right, pour the ghee at the exact second, build the altar with the right number of bricks, the gods must grant your wish. It became a way to coerce the gods, to bend reality to your will.
It sounds like a vending machine. Put the coin in, get the blessing out.
A very, very complicated vending machine. And the Brahmanas, the priests, held the instruction manual. This gave them immense power and wealth.
But inevitably, when religion becomes a transaction, people start to feel empty.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that feeling, that dissatisfaction, leads to a backlash.
It's a philosophical backlash.
That backlash is what gives us the Upanishads. Towards the end of the Vedic Age, around 800 to 600 BC, thinkers, not just priests, but kings and women, too, started retreating to the forests. They asked, is this all there is? Killing animals and pouring ghee into fire? What is the point?
They wanted to know the why, not just the how.
They wanted to know the ultimate reality behind the ritual. The Upanishads shift the focus from the outer altar to the inner soul. They introduce the revolutionary concepts of Atman and Brahman.
Okay, this is the heavy stuff. Break it down for us.
Atman is the individual self. It's the core of your being, the consciousness looking out of your eyes right now, the spark of life within you.
And Brahman.
Brahman is the universal reality, the cosmic energy, the ultimate principle that makes up the entire universe. It's the ocean.
And the connection is that the spark within me is a part of that ocean.
Not just a part. The big realization of the Upanishads is Tattvamasi. You are that. The individual soul, the Atman, is not just a part of the universal soul, Brahman. It is identical to it. The drop is the ocean.
This is where the quantum physics comparison comes in.
It's startling, isn't it? The Chandogya Upanishad, for instance, discusses the nature of the universe using a beautiful analogy. There is a dialogue where a father, Uddalaka, is teaching his son, Shutakatu. He tells the boy to put a lump of salt in a bowl of water and come back in the morning.
The boy comes back, and the salt has dissolved. It's gone.
The father says, son, sip from the top of the water. How does it taste? The boy says, salty. Sip from the middle. Salty. Sip from the bottom. Salty.
It's everywhere.
The father says the salt is everywhere, even though you can't see it. And the same way, the subtle essence, this pure being, is everywhere in this universe. You can't see it, but it is there. And you, Shvetikotu, are that.
That is basically an explanation of atomic potential or fields, an unseen essence that constitutes everything.
It echoes modern quantum theory, that the fundamental nature of the universe isn't solid stuff, but a potentiality, a consciousness that pervades everything. It's a massive cognitive leap from cowboys asking for more cows to philosophers deconstructing the nature of existence.
And we also get our national motto from this era.
Satyam of Jayat, truth alone triumphs. It comes from the Mundaka Upanishad.
So we have these layers of literature. Let's do a quick knowledge stack review for the listener just to keep the text straight. We start with the 4 Vedas.
Right. At the base, you have the 4 Samhitas. First, the Rig Veda, the oldest and most important. Hymns to the gods, the foundation.
The one with the Battle of 10 Kings.
Exactly. Then the Sama Veda, the Book of Melodies. They basically took hymns from the Rig Veda and set them to music for the rituals. It's the origin of Indian classical music, the Drupada Raga.
Okay.
Third, the Yajur Veda. This is the practical manual. It contains the prose mantras and tells you how to perform the rituals. It's split into the black and white Yajur Veda based on how the instructions are arranged.
A priest's handbook.
Correct. And finally, the Atharma Veda. This one is the outlier. It's full of spells, charms, folk medicine, and magic for everyday problems. Love spells, curses for enemies, cures for diseases. It's the folk Veda, closer to the common person's superstitions and daily life.
And then attached to each of these are the appendices, the commentaries.
Right, the Brahmanas. These are prose texts that explain the complex symbolism and rules for the priests performing the rituals, the rule books.
And the forest books.
The Aranyakas, the forest books. These were for the hermits who had retired from society. They focus more on mysticism and the inner meaning of the rituals, bridging the gap between ritual and philosophy.
And at the top of the stack.
The Upanishads, the sitting near texts, recording the philosophical dialogues between a guru and a student. This is the culmination of the philosophy of Atman and Brahman. Together, this entire body of literature is called Shruti, that which is heard.
It's a massive library. One thing that struck me in the notes about the Rig Veda was the mention of ghost hymns. What is that about?
Ah, yes. This is a haunting idea. Internal references in the texts themselves and the way they are structured imply that there were other verses, other hymns, maybe even entire collections that didn't survive.
Why no?
You have to remember, this was a purely oral tradition for more than 1,000 years before it was ever written down. Everything depended on memorization. If a priestly family died out, or if a particular branch of the tradition fell out of favor, their verses could be lost forever.
So what we have, as massive as it is just the survivor. The greatest hits.
Exactly. We are looking at the collection that certain schools of priests decided was important enough to memorize and pass down. Who knows what incredible history, what different social structures, or perhaps alternative viewpoints, maybe more from the women or the commoners, vanished simply because someone forgot the verses.
That's a chilling thought. We are basing our entire understanding of this foundational era on the surviving fragments.
It teaches us humility. We can only know what the record keepers chose to keep. But even with just the fragments, the legacy is undeniable.
So if we step back and look at the whole arc, 1500 BC to 600 BC, we started with semi-nomadic, cattle-herding tribes in the Punjab.
A society that was tribal, relatively egalitarian, and mobile.
We ended with settled territorial kingdoms in the Ganges Valley, using iron tools supporting a growing population.
A society that was monarchical, agricultural, and increasingly stratified.
We saw the hardening of the caste system, the decline in the status of women.
But we also saw the birth of some of the most profound philosophical ideas in human history, the peaks of the Upanishads.
It's the incubation of a civilization. The political concept of Farad starts here. The social structure of caste starts here. The philosophical quest for the self starts here. You cannot understand India today without understanding this 1,000-year shift.
It's absolutely not a static dark age. It was a 1,000-year churn that forged a culture, with all its glories and its problems.
And it leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We tend to look at history as a march of progress. But in this era, we see clear trade-offs. They gained iron, cities, and empires.
But they lost the egalitarian spirit of the tribe.
They gained complex philosophy.
But the majority of women lost their right to education and their public voice. Progress comes with a price tag.
And history's about who pays it.
Always.
Well, that is a lot to chew on. From the banks of the lost river Saraswati to the debates of Gargi, that was our deep dive into the Vedic Age.
A journey worth taking.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next dive.